Hi, and welcome back to Football Made Simple.
The pre-tournament favourites took to the pitch for the first time when Brazil squared off against Serbia. After a hard-fought encounter featuring interesting tactics from both managers, the match ended 2-0 to Brazil thanks to a Richarlison double, with the XG showing it was a deserved win. But what tactics did we see from both managers? Let's take a quick look. If you're interested, this video and several others usually go up early for early access on Patreon, so if you want to check that out, head over to patreon.com/footballmadesimple, and it helps to support the channel. And we'll begin with Brazil in possession as they had 59% of the ball. Generally, Serbia operated in a mid-block, so Brazil could come out of their first phase fairly easily. And initially, Brazil were looking to overload the center of the pitch, and that was done by switching to a 3-2, with Alexandro operating as the third centre-back and Danilo pushing into the midfield alongside Casemiro. This would then allow Paqueta to push up as a 10 alongside Neymar, whilst Vinicius and Rafinha were pushing high and extremely wide. This was effective at first, because both of their fullbacks in Danilo and Sandro are fairly limited in a physical sense and are not the most technical, so they could operate deeper where there is less emphasis on attacking qualities. At the same time, Brazil's wingers in Rafinha and Vinicius are both great in 1-versus-1 situations, so this formation would allow them to be isolated against the wing-back, whilst also ensuring that the centre had plenty of numbers. But Serbia's defence, until they did concede, was generally excellent. Firstly, they could switch their pressing shape, either to a front two of Tadic and Mitrovic, whilst Milinkovic-Savic looked to join. This would allow the midfielders to remain deeper on the floating 10s, whilst Milinkovic-Savic could pick up one of the pivots, with a bias towards Casemiro, who's much more of a threat on the ball than Danilo. At the same time, Mitrovic and Tadic as a two could look to apply some pressure onto the centre-backs. So when defending, Serbia's front three could be much narrower, consisting of Mitrovic, Milinkovic-Savic and Tadic, allowing their central midfielders to remain deeper, as he will look to track back. So if the centre was congested, Brazil's build-up shape could alter. Firstly, they would revert to a back two of Silva and Marquinhos. And now instead of a 3-2, it was a 2-3, with Danilo and Alexandro both operating extremely wide. Serbia's shape would still allow them to apply pressure centrally in general, but now the fullbacks were the easy outlets for Brazil on either side. So this was Brazil's alternate build-up shape with a back two and both fullbacks remaining fairly wide so that they could easily be found by either centre-back. But Serbia probably didn't mind this too much, as these fullbacks were the least technical for Brazil, so they wouldn't cause as much danger when they did receive. But two of Brazil's biggest dangers were in the wide regions, so Serbia couldn't afford to be completely passive when the ball did go wide to these fullbacks. They had to adapt, and one of the ways they did this was now switching to more of a 1-2 in the defense, with Tadic and Milinkovic-Savic either side of Mitrovic. So this meant that when the ball was wide, it would be much easier for the forward to look to press the fullback and not always depend on the midfielder instead coming out, as this would leave Neymar potentially free. So not only would this allow the midfielder to remain central, it would cover the passing lane directly to the dangerous winger, whilst also allowing the wingback to remain deep, meaning that the three centre-backs could remain in their positions. But it was only possible for the wider forwards to get out when Brazil were moving the ball slowly. If they did manage to get the ball to the fullback in plenty of space, they had to have alternatives. And this was possible because the wingbacks for Serbia were highly game aware and fairly aggressive. So, whilst the ball was on the way to the fullback, they were already looking to press. And again, these were the press targets for Serbia. So, they would look to force them backwards, if possible. And the defense would react to the movements of the wingback, as they could now either switch to the 4 with one centre-back coming deep and being covered by the other centre-backs, or actually stick to a back 3 by dropping a midfielder into the backline temporarily and looking to stop the danger there. But when Brazil were able to get past this first wave of pressure, that's when they looked truly dangerous, as this would often force one of the pivots higher up to confront a man. Firstly, it would allow Brazil to find their wingers 1-versus-1, and Vinicius in particular was so explosive with his dribbling that he would often take his man on down the byline and get into several dangerous positions. But the central play was also much more possible now and much more dangerous, as, particularly with Neymar dropping deep, he tended to draw the centre-back out of position. And this again would allow Vinicius to use his pace to move into the room created, and then look to get on the end of a pass. And in fact, this led to dangerous opportunities for Brazil and even contributed to one of the goals. So this is a rare occasion where Brazil get past the red wall of Serbia as the ball goes towards Richarlison. So now when Rafinha plays the ball infield, the centre-back from Serbia is drawn towards the ball. This now leaves a massive gap in the backline that Rafinha can look to attack, and he gets on the end of the return pass, leading to a great opportunity. In this situation, the pivots and midfielders from Serbia were dragged to one side of the pitch, and this means that Brazil have a little bit more space on the far side. So now Neymar is free between the lines, so the centre-back is drawn towards him. And again, this has opened up a massive gap in the defence, and Silva passes into Vinicius. But the pass is slightly too heavy. This goal was a bit of individual brilliance, but still, it's a scenario where Neymar is able to get on the ball deeper, and this again draws the centre-back. Firstly meaning that Vinicius is now 1 versus 1 with his man, and there's a massive gap in the backline. With the centre-back still out of position, this contributes to creating the passing lane for Vinicius to find Richarlison. But Serbia were also interesting during the match when they were in possession. So what do they look to do? Firstly, they weren't afraid to play to their strengths, and they have two giants in Mitrovic and Milinkovic-Savic. So they would often look to operate in close proximity, with one looking to win the first ball and knocking it down to the second. But in controlled possession, they were still interesting, and Brazil tended to sit off of Serbia in a fairly passive 4-4-2. Serbia were aggressive in their shape, looking to push both wing-backs high very early on in the build-up play. And interestingly, they would look to drop one of their pivots into the back line, so that they actually had a back four. This was followed by pushing Milinkovic-Savic high up the pitch, and keeping a single pivot so that their shape often looked like a 4-1-5. This had several advantages for Serbia, as if Paqueta and Casemiro were a little bit more defensive and looking to sit on Tadic and Milinkovic-Savic, leading to Richarlison and Neymar being deep, they still had the option of playing over the press to either Mitrovic or Milinkovic-Savic. So the Serbia shape often looked like this. A back four, with one of the four being a pivot who's dropped in, a single pivot, and a front five as Tadic is going to join. But it also had other advantages, as if Richarlison and Neymar did look to press, there was the potential to find the pivot in plenty of space in the midfield. And in this situation, with the back four potentially overloaded, Serbia could then look to move higher up the pitch. But this shape could get so much more interesting than that, as first of all, the left centre-back, Pavlovic, was highly aggressive when they were in possession, so he would often look to receive. And now Serbia could enact a side overload, with the wing-back, the centre-back playing as a left-back, a forward and one of the pivots moving across, so that they had a 4 versus 3 in this situation. This would, of course, force Brazil to move across the pitch in order to compensate, and this would then open up the opportunity for Serbia to enact the switch and then look to attack, which did look promising at times. So again, the shape starts like this, with one of the midfielders dropping into the backline and Pavlovic being the left centre-back. Again, Pavlovic is aggressive in his positioning, so now Serbia have a side overload going, and this forces Brazil to come across the pitch in order to cover. At the same time, the far side winger is in plenty of space, so now when Mitrovic drops, he can look to find him. Overall, on the balance of play, Brazil were the deserved winners, but Serbia showed that they may be a force in this World Cup with their tactical astuteness. For the managerial tactical scores, Tite did enough to win with the quality in his side, earning him a 6, but I thought Stojkovic held his own, with his side doing great until the first goal went in, earning him a 7.5. But what are your thoughts? Drop them down below. And a special thanks to my latest patrons, including Justin Robinson, 12, Bagat, Konstantinos, Cesar, Jack G, and Lesego.